What's the math behind the characters' power levels in Lorcana? And is there power creep in the second set? Let's take a look. Hi friends, welcome back to Nearly Same Games. I'm Neil, and today we're talking about the power level of characters in Lorcana. Before we begin, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're slowly creeping our way to our 1,000 subscriber goal, and I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button as well. All right, today we're talking about a mathematical formula to determine the power levels of characters in Lorcana. Now, what do I mean by power level? Uh, I'm looking for a way to measure the power level of a card and uh, do that in a mathematical formula that uh, can give me kind of an average of all the cards and see which cards fit on a more powerful level and which cards are more balanced or underpowered. Now, the way I want to do this is I want to set up a formula that I can pretty much add any of the cards to, add up their values, and get a number value. And the number value I'm looking for is 0. 0 means that in a perfect world, all cards would balance to 0, and you wouldn't have cards that are more powerful than another card or less powerful than another card. So a value of 0 will mean that the card is balanced according to this formula and other cards. A positive value, say if you have a value of 5, that would be a slightly overpowered card. And a value of -5 would mean that that card is slightly undervalued based on the math. Now, one of the things to make sure that I'm clear on is this doesn't give an absolute power level for each card. You can look at a card like Lilo Making a Wish, a 1-drop that quests for 2 lore with one power and 1 willpower. That's a powerful card, no matter how you look at it. And my math actually shows that as being having a power level of -5, which we'll get to. But just to say that these numbers don't necessarily give the full picture. Also, there's combinations of powers that could make something like the 5-drop Cusco be very powerful with his ward, his ability to quest for 3, and his additional ability that banishes the challenger that banishes him. So my formula doesn't really take into account those things. But let's take a look at how my formula will handle this. First of all, what are we using to consider how powerful a character is? Well, there's 6 characteristics on the card that I want to take a look at. First is the cost of the character. So however much ink it takes to get the character on the board. The second part is whether or not that character is inkable or not. An inkable character has more value to you as a card, but there is potential that we can eke out additional power on the card if we make it uninkable and still have it sort of balance out. The next thing is how much lore will this character give you when you quest with it? So you have, if you have the green Hans that quests for 3 lore as opposed to a character that's only questing for 1 lore, that's got to make a difference in there somehow, and we got to incorporate that into our calculations. The character's strength and willpower or defense. These 2 characteristics determine how good they survive in a challenge and how good they are at attacking in a challenge. So those 2 numbers will take an effect on how powerful that character is. And finally, we have the abilities. And the abilities are complicated, and we'll get to that in a minute. So first of all, we need to start with figuring out a baseline for how our characters' values are calculated. So I'm going to start with vanilla characters. And what I mean by vanilla characters are that they are an inkable character. They have no special abilities, and they only quest for one lore. And the reason I want to look at that is because those are kind of an equal starting point for looking at each character and trying to figure out what kind of base value and what kind of scoring system I can use for these characters to kind of balance them out. So while we're doing this, we're going to be looking at the characteristics and determine if this is a characteristic that gains value to the card or decreases value from the card. For instance, a higher power with all other stats the same compared to a card that has a lesser strength, that the card with the higher strength will have a greater score. And as an example of a negative, the cost is a negative. So with all the stats being the same, other than the cost, a one cost character is going to be more powerful than a two cost character because that cost is going to take away from our ability to play that card. So we're going to take a look at all of these things with, I'm going to take a vanilla character, and it's going to be the two cost vanilla Minnie Mouse zipping around. Now, we're going to start each card with negative 10 points. Now, what's going on? Negative 10 points? The negative 10 points means that we can give 10 points worth of value to the character before we've added anything else to the card. This pushes up our very low cost characters up a little bit of a notch. And I think that they kind of wanted to start from a little bit of a place of power. So we can start in with those 2 2s for 1 with 2 strength and 2 willpower for 1 cost, and have room to take away there and still add on additional abilities. So we're going to start with that negative 10 points. Next, we're going to subtract 10 points for each ink in the cost. So for Minnie requires 2 ink, so we're going to subtract 20 points. All right. Now, since Minnie is inkable, we will add 0 points. Okay, adding 0 points. The thing is, if Minnie was not inkable, we would subtract 5 points from the total score of this character. So uninkable would be considered a detriment to the character, whereas inkable is a positive. Actually, inkable is neutral, it's 0. All right, now we add 5 points for each point in strength. Minnie strength is 3, so we add 15 points. We do the same with willpower, so we add 10 for Minnie's 2 willpower. So we add 5 points for each willpower. Finally, we add 5 points for each value of lore Minnie will produce. She only has 1, so 5 more points. Adding these all together, we get negative 10 plus negative 20 plus 0 plus 15 plus 10 plus 5, or 0 points total. This indicates that this character is mathematically balanced. I know what you're saying. You're saying, but Neil, what about Stitch New Dog, whose points add up to 5? Or the 4-cost Elsa, Queen Regent, whose points add up to negative 5? Well, it turns out that most Lorcana cards will fall into this negative 5 points to plus 5 points range. When we look at cards that have multiple lore symbols, we add 5 points for each of those, and we see that they still fall in that negative 5 to plus 5 point range. So when you're looking at the range of cards, you'll notice that most 1-cost cards sit at the 5 point range. They're a little bit more powerful than the average base card. So when you go to 2, you start getting into a more leveled out range. As a matter of fact, you can find a little signpost as a card that costs 2, has a strength of 2, has a willpower of 2, and has 2 lore. And you can see these key cards kind of all the way up through the list with a few exceptions. So If we look at the one cost characters that have two lore, Maleficent and Lilo, we see that they are both uninkable. And I think the reason that this happened is because you know how powerful each of those cards is on turn one. Starting the quest on turn two with two lore each turn uh, is a very big deal. And if you protect it with Simba, that's even more difficult to get rid of and can become a problem very quickly. So I think that despite my scoring system actually scoring these at -5 points apiece, I think they're correctly scored because there is an obvious uh, power bump with those characters as opposed to a two strength, two willpower, uh, one cost character otherwise. Now, as you go up the curve, things start to go along fine, and we get back into this um, two power, two willpower for two cost with two lore, and then we go up to three power. Then we go up to three strength, three willpower, three cost with two lore, and we hit kind of a little stumbling block at four. Four does not have a four strength, four toughness, four cost, two lore character. We kind of dance around it a little bit. We have a 3/4 or a 4/3 with two lore, or we have a 4/4 with only one lore. We don't actually hit this spot. So I'm wondering if that four power is kind of left as a little bit of a gap to have a little breather before we get into the really powerful cards at five power. But once we get to five power, we get back into that same rhythm. We have a five power, five willpower, five cost, two lore character. And you can see that goes up to six, that goes up to seven. And we get at the top end, things get a little bit strange as well. You hit eight, and the 8/8 for eight is Maui. And Maui has three lore available to them. And then as you continue up that ladder, you go up to nine, and you get the 10/10 Goofy with four lore. And if you look at their scores, they're above the normal score. But I think that the kind of philosophy around this with card games is that when you get up to the ninth round, you should be ending the game. These should be more powerful than the normal power available to you. And so I can see them kind of tuning cards in a way that would put more game ending strength at that top end to make you, one, want to get to that top end, and two, once you do get to that top end, have some really powerful cards that you're putting down. So moving on, we need to look at abilities. Now, this is the part that gets really tricky. Common abilities are pretty easy. Things like Rush, Ward, Evasive. You can kind of look at the characters that only have those abilities on them, kind of see how they balance out without them, and kind of figure out where the place is for the values for each of those abilities. And again, you can tweak them enough so that usually you can get most characters to fit in that -5 to +5 range of scoring. Now, like most card games, Lorcana has a ton of unique abilities. If you look at just about any card that has shift on it, that also has an ability that is not replicated other places on that card. So those abilities are very difficult to assign a number. It's not very difficult to assign a number to, but in the end, if I'm going to score out all of those abilities, I'm just going to look at the score of the card and figure out what's missing. So if this card comes up with -10 as its score, that ability I'm going to score as 10. And it doesn't really give us any insight. It doesn't really let us compare anything. So I haven't really looked at those unique abilities so much. But I have left a link to my spreadsheet in the description below. So you can go in there and open it and look at it. You can save off a copy and start trying to change the numbers on your own and see what you get. You can also look up those other cards if you'd like to. And if you see things that seem out of place or just don't seem right or just scores that you just don't agree with at all, leave a comment in the link below and let me know what you think. And maybe I'll make a tweak and update the spreadsheet for that. So looking at all these numbers, what did I discover about Lorcana? What did I learn? Well, I've learned that Maleficent, Monstrous Dragon, is a hard card to balance as anything other than super powerful. Mickey Mouse, Brave Little Tailor, one of the biggest cards that was revealed early on, despite being a very powerful card, is actually a little bit underpowered based on my calculations. Chief Tui is a mathematically terrible card. And I think there's a pretty decent argument that he's just a pretty terrible card in general. And of course, the most important thing I learned is that Goofy, Night for a Day, is the most powerful Lorcana card. All right, that's all I have for today. Until next time, friends, you've been watching Nearly Same Games.